Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And this week has been kind of crazy. So Kelly Barner, my co-founder on the Procurement Revolution, and I have been busily recording and packaging content for the event and preparing for the live activities that are going to take place throughout next week. And so as well as the live daily webinars that are going to accompany the core content, we're also going to be experimenting with other channels. So we'll look at Twitter as an example so that we can try and facilitate a collective conversation from people from across our profession covering the issues that we feel, and I think that the revolutionaries as part of the event feel, are shaping our future. And so in the course of recording content, there was one piece that I just couldn't wait for the revolution itself to publish. And so what I thought I'd do is actually publish that submission that I received here as an Art of Procurement Friday show. And the recording is by Kate Vitasek, who you might recall actually appeared on the Art of Procurement not so long ago, actually back in episode 74, in what was certainly one of my most enjoyable conversations. And as a reminder, Kate currently serves as a faculty member in the University of Tennessee's graduate and executive education programs. But Kate is best known as the founder and lead researcher in the concept of vested, otherwise known as vested outsourcing, which was developed in conjunction with the University of Tennessee. Kate's published 6 books to date on the vested concept. She has appeared on CNN, NPR, Bloomberg Radio, and Fox News. Kate's work has also been featured in over 300 publications, including the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, where she is a regular contributor. And prior to joining the University of Tennessee, Kate enjoyed a career on the corporate side, with positions at companies such as P&G, Microsoft, and Accenture. And for some context, I asked Kate, as part of the revolution, to give a perspective on an area that she believes, we need to mature in as we increase the relevancy of our profession. And before I hand over the reins to Kate of the Art of Procurement today, I do want to say a short thank you to today's sponsor for making the Art of Procurement possible. And I'm proud to say that this episode of the Art of Procurement is brought to you by Denali. And Denali is a procurement-focused, technology-agnostic, and highly efficient managed services provider. Denali specializes in providing a variety of different procurement services, including category management, sourcing, contracting, supplier management, and P2P for global 2,000 clients across multiple industries. Denali understands that every client has challenges with their procurement delivery model that are unique to that company. And as a former buyer and provider of procurement managed services, it's always been clear to me that Denali prides themselves on really building solutions that are tailored to solve the individual needs of each client, and not just trying to implement something that's off the shelf. So by partnering with Denali's procurement professionals, your organization can generate more value and faster. So to find out more, I'd just love if you could head over to artofprocurement.com/Denali sourcing. That's artofprocurement.com/Denali sourcing. All right, so I'm going to hand over control to Kate, and I'll be back to close the show in a few minutes.
Hello, I'm Kate Vitasek, faculty member at the University of Tennessee's Graduate and Executive Education, and I specialize in studying the art, science, and practice of highly collaborative win-win relationships. So you might be asking yourself, why have a highly collaborative win-win relationship? Many of you in the procurement profession have really perfected the art of being a buyer, but have you perfected the art of being a strategic partnership? And should you? Why should you even think about that? And that's some of our latest work. Actually, we've been studying this for about 4 years now, a concept called sourcing business models. And so in today's lecture, what I want to do is share with you a little bit about our work about sourcing business models and how you should be thinking about strategic sourcing in the new economy. Now, this concept of sourcing business models dates back to about a decade, over a decade plus worth of research in our work on vested outsourcing, where we study highly collaborative, successful relationships. And a lot of people would come to us and say, well, I really like the thought of collaboration, and I want to have my supplier be a bit more innovative, but I'm really not ready to jump into a fully vested partnership where I'm all in and all my eggs are in one basket with that supplier. And so we started to look at sourcing as a continuum and say, can you actually step up the continuum and create more collaborative types of relationships that create value? And the answer is yes. So let's dig into some of the philosophies behind sourcing business model theory and some of the business models that can help you make that shift up your own continuum as you strive to create value for your relationship. So I want to point out a gentleman by the name of Oliver Williamson. Now, he is a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and he won a Nobel Prize in 2009. Now, in his work, he studies something called transaction cost economics. And if you think about sourcing as a continuum, on one end you have what Oliver calls as the market, and on the other end you have what he calls as a hierarchy, and that would be a make decision. So most sourcing decisions today are make versus buy. And what he says is there's really this large playground in the middle. And so the premise of his work is that sourcing is often viewed as a make-buy decision, but it should be thought of as a continuum. And if we think of all those options in the middle, those would be what he would call a hybrid. Now, this is where our work comes in at the University of Tennessee, because our original work in the area of these hybrid relationships was around vested outsourcing. And as organizations started to look and apply vested, many were scared to move to these vested relationships because they felt they were just too strategic. It was, for example, one of our case studies is Microsoft and Accenture. Accenture does global finance operations for Microsoft around the world, all 116 of their subsidiaries. Jones Lang LaSalle, strategic partnership with Procter & Gamble, manager worldwide facilities management across the globe. And a lot of organizations said, I'm not ready for that. I just and don't feel I'm mature enough to make that leap to managing a very strategic partnership in that area. So in our work, we started to look at the various kinds of hybrid relationships that you could have. So I have a slide here I want to point out. It maps the 7 sourcing business models to Oliver Williamson's continuum. So on the far left, we have transactional type relationships. There's a basic provider and approved provider model. Now, I'm sure as procurement professionals, you absolutely nail getting these right. And actually, I would even say that you probably are outstanding at having preferred provider relationships. But that's where we find most organizations stop, right? They segment their suppliers, and if they're a strategic supplier, they would lump them into this preferred provider model. So here's the problem. These preferred provider relationships are still transactional in nature, right? Per unit, per mile, per widget. And so I'm moving into these relational types of more strategic relationships, but the economics is being anchored in transactional-based economics. And where we see the opportunity for organizations to move up the sourcing continuum is to shift to more output-based and outcome-based economic models. So those would be where we would find performance-based or managed services relationships, or further up the continuum, vested relationships. Right? So if I'm going to buy, I now have 5 types of sourcing business models that we can use. And if I choose to make, or as Oliver says, use a hierarchy and invest in my own operations, we can either create a shared services model or an equity partnership. We can go out and have a joint venture. We can create a subsidiary, different types of things. And so this is where we start to really differentiate what do these sourcing business models look at and how are they different. Because many people say strategic partner, but they're still anchored in what we would call a preferred provider relationship. So teaching people how to truly move up that sourcing continuum, either to performance-based or to vested. So what is a sourcing business model, right? I've used that term a few times now, and you're probably going, clarify that for me. Well, a sourcing business model is a combination of a relationship model and an economic model. And there are 7 sourcing business models. And each serve to optimize a business across 25 key attributes. Now, in our book, Strategic Sourcing in the New Economy, we outline what these 25 attributes are and how you would go through what we call a business model mapping exercise to decide which model is best for you. But in a nutshell, the more complex your business, the more dynamic your business, the more risky your business, you want to shift up the continuum to a more of a partnership model where you're moving from transactional economics to either output or outcome-based economics. So organizations should consider consciously selecting the sourcing business model that is most appropriate for your sourcing situation. So shifting from these more basic types of supplier relationships, basic, approved, and preferred, to performance-based and vested. So let's dig into a little bit more about what the differences are between a relationship model and an economic model. So a relationship model determines how you will formally control or influence your supplier source. So there are three types of relationship models. A transactional contract, right, which is a very arm's length market-based contract. It could just be a simple PO with a supplier, or a very, a short master services agreement. But it's arm's length in nature. Then you have a relational contract, and then you would have an investment-based or a vertical integration type contract. That would be your joint ventures. So the nature of those three contracts are very, very different. And the vast majority of organizations today have transactional relationship contracts, arm's length. Think of them as buyer-supplier. I'm the buyer, you're the supplier. If you do a great job of being a buyer, you're going to shift the risk to your supplier. If they're a great job of being a supplier and they have a lot of power, they're going to shift those risks back. So very adversarial, arm's length, traditional type of a contract. Now let's look at the economic model. An economic model determines how you will manage the economics of the relationship. There are transactional based economics. That's where you pay per unit, per hour, per activity. There are output-based economic models. That's where you're paying the supplier for a set output. Think of paying them for a service level agreement or a guaranteed savings glide path. So in the IT space, that would be our managed services type contracts. and logistics, those are called performance-based logistics. So performance-based contracts, those types of contracts. And then the third type of economic model is an outcome-based model. And outcomes are boundary spanning. Think of them as going to Mount Everest. You can't get to Mount Everest without your Sherpa, right? So they really are boundary spanning, shared risk, shared reward. Where an output, I've shifted the risk to the supplier and they're accountable to meet that SLA. I may have a penalty if I don't get that SLA if I'm a supplier. So those are the options that we have. And depending on the attributes of our business, we're going to pick which sourcing business model is most appropriate for us. And so as we do that, we want to ask ourselves, what type of relationship model are we seeking and what type of economic model? So relational contracts are used when we have a preferred provider, a performance-based, or a vested model. And that's because we're choosing to be more strategic with those relationships. We want to create a relational type contract to help us work more strategically and manage that dynamic and risky environment, help us think about innovation and how we're going to work collaboratively to drive that innovation. Now, a transactional contract is needed when we have a basic or approved provider. And they're simple, they're quick, they're short-term exchanges, they're static. You know, if you don't like your supplier, you switch out your supplier, you just bid them out again. So one of the issues that we see is that a lot of times people are saying they have a strategic relationship and they've created a preferred provider model, but they really are thinking of them in very transactional economics. So we want to move up that sourcing continuum to be more output and outcome-based economic models, especially as we start to share risk and share rewards. So why use a relational contract? So it dates back to the 1960s. Ian McNeil, a legal scholar, studied contracts, and he said, you know, contracts should be a instrument for social cooperation. And he stated that we really need to can only govern our relationships efficiently if both parties adopt a consciously cooperative attitude. And that's why we want to move to these relational contracts, because risky, dynamic, innovation, when we want those kind of buzzwords, we need to consciously cooperate. And unfortunately, our traditional transactional arm's length contracts put a wedge and create tension in our relationship. So as you move along the sourcing continuum, you need to think differently and across different perspectives. So let's think about being a procurement, a great buyer. You move from being a great buyer to moving to being a great partner or value architect. You're really trying to seek value and work with those suppliers or even your internal business partners or joint venture to create value, right? Instead of exchanging value, I'm creating value. From a stakeholder perspective, we're moving from operational managers to transformational leaders. Remember, in the vested model, 5 rules that will transform outsourcing, right? Those were the kinds of goals, transformational goals, are what P&G and Microsoft and Department of Energy sought is transformation, innovation. So as I move up the sourcing continuum, I want more transformation and innovation. And from a supplier's perspective, you're moving from a vendor to a solution provider, from very tactical to strategic. So think about your relationships. How many do you have that truly should be treated as strategic, that you're trying to value architect, be more transformational, and move to solving solutions, as P&G would say, wicked problems? As you have those attributes, you want to shift up that sourcing continuum and create more performance-based or managed services deals or vested deals. And if something is so strategic, it's such a core competency, maybe you even invest in yourself with a joint venture. So how do I make this shift to collaborative relationships when I have to bid that out? Well, you want to use different tools in your toolkit. Don't just use a traditional RFP, right, a request for proposal. Begin to use more qualitative type tools, such as a request for solutions. Slow down, ask your supplier for those solutions, and evaluate those solutions. Don't just evaluate and say, here's my spec, give me a price or give me a proposal. Slow down, work with suppliers to help them solve your problem, right? Or in most strategic relationships, use a request for partner, right? A request for partner. You're buying a partnership, and the cultural fit and the compatibility are very essential. So we move from request for price, request for proposal, to really request for solutions and request for partnerships. So it's a different way as we shift up that continuum. So I encourage you to read our new book, Strategic Sourcing in the New Economy. It goes into great details about sourcing business models. And if you have questions, download our open source material. We have a wonderful sourcing business model map tool that you can download, or give me a buzz at email at Kate Vitasek at utk.edu.
Hi there, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Art of Procurement. Kate referred to some slides, and those are actually going to be available through the Procurement Revolution website. So to register for the event, to listen to more than 35 other procurement leaders share their visions of the future, you can head on over to theprocurementrevolution.com. And just one last thing, while the Revolution, it's a week-long online event, the content will live on. So if you're listening to this podcast anytime after September the 30th, 2016, the last day of the event, you can still head on over to the site to see how you can get involved. All right, I'm going to go back to work on packaging together more of the submissions we've received, that I hope to see you at the event. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.